Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thanks a lot for watching us. And we're glad you chose to learn more about the approach we co-created to build individual resilience to climate change impacts through futures literacy. This approach was developed by One Resilient Earth in collaboration with Loes Damhof from the Hanze University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. Loes Damhof is a senior lecturer at the university, and she also holds a chair on futures literacy with UNESCO. But before I tell you more about this approach, we developed the findings of our pilot project, what are the next steps and what are the opportunities for you to engage that you could benefit from. I'd like to introduce myself and tell you a bit more about One Resilient Earth, which is a new organization that you may not know about already. So my name is Laureline Simon. I've been working on climate change adaptation and mitigation at the international level for about 15 years. I first worked with the French Development Agency and then with the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat in Bonn, Germany, at the Adaptation Department, where I supported work related to knowledge management and stakeholder engagement. I also worked on loss and damage associated with climate change impacts on local communities and indigenous peoples platform before supporting activities related to resilience frontiers, a collective intelligence process on long-term resilience, post-2030 resilience. And I'm currently the founder and the executive director of One Resilient Earth, which is an international non-profit organization based in Bonn, Germany, and in New York City. So One Resilient Earth is a woman-led organization with a diverse team whose purpose is really to raise awareness about the multifaceted impacts of climate change, but also build the resilience of individuals to the impacts of climate change, the multifaceted impacts of climate change we mentioned before, by the regeneration of communities and ecosystems. So how do we do that? So we do this by a transdisciplinary approach, transdisciplinary projects that bring together arts, science, ancient wisdom, and new technologies when relevant. And in practice, at the moment, we're working on different areas and work streams. So we have an online magazine called Zero, where we directly discuss and question the concepts of resilience and regeneration through interviews with artists and scientists, community members, including by exploring themes such as regenerative agriculture. We also support local communities on the ground with their projects on green recovery and long-term resilience, as we recently did in Atlantic Canada with a community there. We also foster collaboration and dialogues between arts and science, and we're currently co-organizing an art science lecture series with the University of Bonn in Germany on the theme of ecology and the metamorphosis of modern society. It's free online, it's open to all, so don't hesitate to join. And we also hold a number of events, all online at the moment, as you can imagine, to support individuals specifically in building their own resilience to various climate change impacts. So among others, we organize a weekly climate workers circle, where people of all ages working across different disciplines, geographies, either directly or indirectly on climate change, are welcome to come and share openly about the emotions that they experience while working on climate change, and also to practice deep listening. And last but not least, we also organize workshops that are open to all people with the objectives of building individual resilience to climate change impacts with futures literacy. This is an essential part of our holistic and transdisciplinary approach to building resilience, and this is specifically the topic I would like to tell you more about today in this presentation. So, as you may have noticed, the question of the resilience of individual, meaning the emotional and psychological resilience to climate change impacts, is rarely addressed in the climate adaptation world. As I was preparing this video and looking at the list of side events that are already confirmed, so there are about 50 side events, and they all focus on climate change adaptation or resilience for different sectors, for different geographical scales, different territories. They look at different technologies, but there were only 2 side events, addition to ours, that were dealing about cultural change, shifts in mindset, or even mental health. And 2 is actually a good number. I mean, it's a welcome change, and I'm very, very curious to hear more about those events and participate in them. Because from my past experience working on climate change with large public organizations for over a decade, this question of how do we cope with the information that we're dealing with the interventions that we are working on climate change, is very rarely addressed. And how we feel about climate change, what we experience is affecting our behavior or the choices we're making at personal or professional level, is not really on the agenda. And it's very clear that the work we're doing is always about focusing on the science, taking practical action very quickly, because it is urgent and there is no denying about it. But this absence of focus on individual resilience, on emotional and psychological resilience, opens lots of questions to us. And we feel it also goes along this kind of war rhetoric that you hear a lot when people talk about climate change. So it's about fighting climate change. It's about implementing warlike efforts. References to World War II are regularly there. Reference to the Marshall Plan. And in that framework, if climate change is overwhelming to you, it is somehow implied that maybe you're not the right fit for the job. So most people don't even talk about it. I don't know if you can relate to it and if it resonates with your experience at your workplace. On this point, I'm not going to go much deeper into mental health and climate change. It's a related topic. There would be lots of points to raise, and we're just starting to work on it at the moment. But instead, I would like to discuss with you the question of the mindset of the people who, such as you, who are working towards climate change on a daily basis. And by mindsets, I'm talking about the way of thinking, the inclination, the opinions, the state of mind. And it relates to another question to us. Could the way we respond to the problem of climate change through the mindsets that we have at the moment, through our current mindsets, be actually part of the problem and not of the solution? Is there no way that we can address climate change differently than by going into war against today's reality or our projection of the future, while stuffing uncomfortable emotions down? Looking at the scale of the climate crisis, which is basically going to redefine our lives and that of our children, how long can we be at war? And what have been the results so far? And who are we fighting in the end? Besides, based on personal experience and recent research, it appears that a change in mindset can limit some of the mental health issues related to climate change, such as stress and anxiety. And when I'm talking about recent research, I'm referring to some fascinating work that's currently being done by the University of Lund in Sweden through the program called Mind for Change, and also to some work that is currently being done at the Potsdam Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Germany through a program called A Mindset for the Anthropocene. So those 2 programs focus largely on the role of mindfulness and meditation in sustainability work. And we have no doubt that mindfulness and meditation have a role to play. We use it a lot at One Resilient Earth. But the approach to changing mindset I'd like to discuss with you today is different. It's complementary, but it's based on a capability called futures literacy. This capability was developed by Real Miller and his team at UNESCO. They have formulated it and developed it, refined it for the past few years. And I've had the chance to experience it when I was still working with the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat and also at One Resilient Earth several times. what this capability suggests is that we could actually change individuals' mindset and make them more resilient to climate change impacts by shifting the way they look at the future. And by more resilient, here what we mean is not only better able to respond to shocks, recover from shocks, and adapt to change easily, which is the common definition of resilience, but we're actually saying that actually this capability could play a role in transformative resilience, which is very much a hot topic today, looking at the scale of the issues that we're facing and the fact that there's been a real lack of action and adaptation so far. So individuals who are future literate, it appears, could be better able to both support and contribute to innovation and transformation in the way adaptation is designed and implemented. And this is where, to us, futures literacy holds the greatest potential for transformation and for transformative resilience and adaptation. But before I discuss how this can be achieved and let you know more about it, I would just like to share with you a brief presentation of futures literacy through an animation video.
The future does not exist, yet we use it every day. We predict, dream, and fear. We plan, organize, and make decisions based on the future. Yet we know very little about how to use the future. Futures literacy is the capability that gives us insight into how we anticipate the future and allows us to unlock our potential to create and innovate. By training students, teachers, and professionals in futures literacy, we equip them with the skills they need to make sense of complexity, take advantage of change, and embrace uncertainty. In an increasingly interconnected world, they become the agents of change we need. How can we use the future? The future will never exist in the present. Our anticipations, plans, dreams, and fears are based on assumptions, on things we take for granted. When we plan and strategize, we often overlook the things that matter to us most. By revealing and examining these assumptions, we open ourselves up to many different futures. This leads to better informed decisions and innovative ideas. In short, we use the future to innovate the present. Futures literacy.
And if this is still a bit abstract to you, we have another video where Loes Damhof explains the approach of futures literacy as a capability in more detail.
So how does that really work? I'm going to let students make a prediction based on whatever they know now and describe a dream of where they want the world to go. So imagine this, it's 2050 and you wake up in the morning. If you get the news in 2050, what are the headlines? What does the world look like? What do you think it looks like? And how do you want it to look like? Those two scenarios are often different. Yeah? And if you just look at those, thinking, hey, if this is what I think it's going, because sometimes in my darkest dreams, I think what Hugo's saying, we're going to a completely digital society. I think, but that's not what I want. But if that's not what I want, if my dream world looks very different, then what am I doing? So the realization that these two are different creates already a different perspective. What are the underlying assumptions that you base your predictions on? Because predictions are based on assumptions, and dreams are based on assumptions. You're assuming technology will continue whether we want it or not. That's an assumption. You're assuming technology fosters progress or wealth for everybody around the world. These are all assumptions. So what do? If you imagine your assumptions and you turn them around or you research them, what happens to your perspective on the future? It changes. Yeah? You can't help but already looking at things from a different perspective. Now, that's a kind of intellectual risk we're taking, but we are innovating the present by using our insight in the future. And that's quite challenging to do that for students, but I believe we can, because we're using collective intelligence together as a group by what do we know now about a certain topic. Can be, I've been using technology, but it can be sustainability. And then we start predicting and we start imagining. And we learn, we make sense-making as learning, and that one is very important because that's what I believe that we as educators should do. Students are learning everywhere, but they're coming to school, and that's the place where we make sense out of it. Now, so we reveal existing assumptions. Then, and this is why communication is so important, you reframe those assumptions. What is a story behind it, and how can we build a better story? How can we build a different story? And if it changes our perspective, what is the next step? And then, if you constantly do that, whenever you examine your assumptions, it changes your perspective on the future. And therefore, it's a constantly iterative process of looking at our future prospects and our societal challenges. And it raises new questions, and those we need to examine. Okay, this project will be a pilot because I'm very curious whether students, when I can do this with students. And the reason why this is so important to me is precisely why I asked earlier. We're always running after the facts. We think the future is some kind of entity that's outside ourselves and doesn't belong in the classroom, but it isn't. We are the present, and we can shape or influence the future. It's not just something that's coming at us. We are here. We can have an opinion. We can do something about it. And that's where I come back to my basic idea is trust. Trust there is a future, and trust in your own ability to do something with it. In order to do this, teachers and students are always these partners on a common journey, because I don't know it either. And these are very big challenges, and they need rigorous thinking, and they need risk-taking, they need failure, and guts and stuff. So we need each other to ensure we have a safety net. So we need to trust each other's attentions. Whether we're here now, in the past, or in the future, we're always connected. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope you understand futures literacy a bit better now. And I assume you may now be wondering if we have any proof of the potential positive impacts of futures literacy in terms of building resilience. Does it really achieve the objective of fostering the resilience of individuals, and can it really support them in designing transformative responses to climate change impacts more generally? And in response to this very legitimate question, I would like to mention the work undertaken under Resilience Frontiers, which is a collective intelligence process that was launched by the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat and a number of partners, including other UN organizations, large non-profit, non-governmental organizations, but also research institutes and youth networks, which I mentioned earlier. And since I co-designed and coordinated the Launchpad Brainstorming Conference that started Resilience Frontiers in 2019 when I was still at the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat, I'm happy to share with you a number of insights and impressions from this event. So the intent of Resilience Frontiers was to bring together 80 thought leaders and visionaries from a variety of fields that were spanning, I would say, new technologies, emerging technologies, and all the way down to how to respond to basic needs, so through water and agriculture, but also addressing issues related to education or law and governance, and in relation to building resilience. And by bringing those 80 thought leaders and visionaries together, their assignment was to think about long-term resilience, to think about post-2030 resilience, and come up with a vision of what it could look like. The idea was that the UN Climate Change Secretariat would then work backwards from this vision by designing a policy-relevant roadmap so that this vision could materialize over time. And this is one approach to fostering transformative resilience through planning that can be questioned today, but that interestingly led to the use of futures literacy through a very specific methodology. And it was used to actually make all those experts working in different fields not get stuck in their own silos, but to question their assumptions together, ask new questions, and find a more open mind space through which they could carry out the visioning exercise. You can find more details about the progress of the Resilient Frontiers Initiative online, so I will not get into this. But what I would like to stress here, and what I found fascinating as an organizer, is that this event had a strong impact on the participants, on the experts that were part of this initiative at a personal level. So some participants became very uncomfortable around the second and the third day of this 5-day event when they had to really question their assumptions about the future, because it relates directly to their expertise and how they've been working so far. And so they were very uncomfortable, they were struggling with this methodology that really asked them to question their assumptions in the sense of also identifying the box in which they were thinking, and they had been thinking all along. But by the end of the event, there were lots of very positive reactions from the experts who were in the room. They really valued this new awareness of the assumptions that had been shaping the way they behaved in the present and that were directly related to their own projections of the future. And some participants came to tell me that they had seen the light, that they had regained motivation, that they were feeling more inspired, more empowered to do their job on a daily basis. So it was extremely positive in terms of feedback. And I think this idea of thinking out of the box becomes all the more clear and all the more interesting when you know where the box is. And that is where futures literacy played a major part in helping locate the box in the mind. Our own limiting beliefs that may prevent innovation from really being designed and implemented. And it's also interesting to note that following this event, Climate Kick, for instance, which supported Resilience Frontiers and whose staff participated in the event, has begun integrating futures literacy in some of its deep demonstration projects around Europe. If you're not familiar, so Climate Kick is a knowledge and innovation community supported by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. And the deep demonstration projects it implements aim at accelerating the transition to a zero carbon and climate resilient society. So, following this event and this experience, it became clear that futures literacy is a capability we can all benefit from, we can all master. It's not extremely complicated to master. And it could play a major part in achieving the transformational change that we need today, including towards resilience to climate change impacts. Hence, following the founding of One Resilient Earth in 2020, in which Loes Damhof is one of our advisors, we both went deeper into questioning how futures literacy as a capability could help build individual resilience, and how it could do that by fostering openness to change, helping embrace uncertainty, and be more creative. Along those reflections, we published a dialogue, which is available online on Medium and also on Tarot Magazine, which was about resilience. And our question was like, what if resilience is about embracing emergence every day? And it's an important question that can really help us reshape how we define resilience, specifically transformative resilience. And after going more in depth into reflections, we tried to think of simple exercises that could be put into workshops so that we could give access to better understanding futures literacy to a much wider audience than the audience of experts and specific practitioners that had been targeted in the past. And I think it was important to us to move from the theory of futures literacy into an actual workshops, because no matter how much I can tell you about it or how much you read about it, it makes an actual and a strong difference to actually experience the workshop, to go through the process of identifying your own assumption with a group and really becoming aware of them. So those workshops are called Growing Your Own Resilience with Futures Literacy. They have contributed already to some of the citizen outreach activities of the Futures Literacy team at Hanze University in the framework of a project called Futures Literacy Across Deep, which is part of the AIT Climate Kick work through deep demonstration projects. And those workshops are led by Loes and myself. They are an open space to better understand possible climate change impacts when considering different GHG emission scenarios. There are space to express emotions related to climate change impacts, to develop one's own futures literacy capability, and then ask new questions related to one's personal resilience today and in the future in a climate-altered world. So we've had very good feedback so far. The workshops are accessible to people who know very little about climate change, but they can also prove quite transformative for people who have been working for a long time on climate change impacts and adaptation. And the next one is happening on February 9th. So don't hesitate to contact us, don't hesitate to join. All information is available on our website, and all new dates related to the workshops are shared on the LinkedIn page of One Resilient Earth. And beyond that, beyond this workshop, which we hope will join, and this short presentation that we've given you today on how individual climate resilience can be built through futures literacy, please don't hesitate to contact us and to continue this important conversation. We're always happy to answer questions, discuss possible areas of collaboration. I also want to stress in conclusion that future literacy is one capability we support to build individual resilience to climate change impacts, but we can also build collective resilience and individual resilience to a number of other approaches and tools that are usually best used in combination. We mentioned mindfulness briefly earlier, but we can also mention the role of the arts as a channel for transformation we've been working with, and we're happy to work more with. And we also want to stress that all the work we're doing is not limited to individuals or communities living in the global north. Futures literacy in itself can help decolonize minds in a variety of ways, old minds, and it's important to stress that point. So do not hesitate to get in touch. We're excited to discuss and co-create with you, and we'll be speaking soon.